you don't really have that much time. Time is not a luxury that many of us have. So for me, it was so important to hard code this. So we hard coded all meetings, all interactions around the data that we wanted. So we, in every interaction we had, we talked about the same metrics. We talked about how they're performing. We started asking the same questions so that every operator knew that this is what we were going to talk about, and started thinking around what are the actions that we can take, and get really creative, because there is so much creativity in the sales team, and they are the front line, so they can see it working out. The 3 hours a day doesn't just magically occur in your calendar to look at this, but predictability is absolutely paramount, and it's even more so in today's world, right? So if you think of the changes we're seeing in the financial climate today, predictability and hitting your ambitions becomes your license to operate. It is as simple as that. And RevOps carry a massive part in that.
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the Revenue Intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview. Or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for.
Carsten, great to have you on the show. Thanks for hanging out with me on a Friday. It's my favorite way to start my day, and I think it's a little bit later for you because you're out in Denmark.
That's right, Devin, and thanks for having me. Obviously a huge fan, and yes, it is towards the end of my week, but definitely a great way to close it, I think. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic. I'm hoping to cap off the week on a high note for you. And if folks are listening to this, start your week on a Monday, starting your week on a high note. So, well, yeah, let's get into it, because you're Chief Customer Officer, or CCO, at Family, and you've been there for about a year now. So I'm curious, kind of, what was the journey, to get to that role?
Yeah, so I'm basically an economist by trade. I have 20 years of experience in commercial and strategy. Started my career with Accenture, had my own business for a couple of years, and then worked for Maersk for the greater amount of years. I can't even count them anymore. It's always been about sort of making an impact and trying to build and transform businesses. When I was looking for a new opportunity, Family sort of threw itself into the mix, and really aligned super well with my idea of creating impact through all of the privileges I've had working for some of the greatest companies, having great education, and getting a lot of opportunities to create businesses, and being a father of 2 girls, as we talked about, the importance of early childhood education and how critical this actually is for our society has just been high on my agenda. And I found that in Family, I could use the experience and all of the privileges that I have obtained over my career to put that to work and actually try to deliver the vision that we have of bringing new tools and ability to collaborate between the educators and parents and have an impact on early years education. So that's actually what brought me into Family. So now I've been there for a year already. Yeah. It's crazy.
That's fantastic. I love that mission. As a dad of 1, soon to be 2, I can definitely relate to that. Well, I know you're passionate about RevOps, so I'd love to hear a little bit more. Like, what did you first notice about RevOps when you got to Family? I imagine in the last year there's been some, a bit of a transition. So maybe like what was kind of that, beginning phase like? What did you observe? And then maybe we can get into kind of how it's changed.
Absolutely. So I think, as rightfully pointed out, RevOps is different in different stages and industries depending on where you are. And when I joined Family, I guess, frankly speaking, didn't really have RevOps. RevOps was sales, because we were at the point where the company had been growing and the sales team really knew what they were doing, and it was operating, and we were smashing our metrics. So year on year, month on month, actually, we were beating our targets, and all metrics were rock solid. And I guess the question started mounting. So if we do it in this size, what do we then need to do to invest? Where do we go? Where do we scale? How can we do that? Where is the growth going to come from? what is the actual benchmark? We know we think we're doing good. What does the outside world really think about us? And what does good look like with our experience? So when I joined, we had what I would call a classic startup RevOps, which is really just understanding the basic metrics and of course wanting to set targets that you then beat. And it was clear that in order to get to that next scale up phase, we really needed RevOps to take a more active role. We needed a much clearer strategy on our efforts and also to set out the right ambitions. Again, what does good actually look like? So we instigated what I call building the airplane analogy, which is that as you are scaling, you will no longer be pilot of everything. So you need to trust the pilots of each individual part of your revenue engine to do what is right, and you will need to be able to learn to read from instruments, which is the data that RevOps gives you, understand what are the interrelations of all of the activities you have. So in the analogy of the aircraft, if you change the wingspan because you are investing, what kind of air tires or what tires do you need to actually successfully land that aircraft? If you have more passengers, how many lavatories do you need to make sure you don't have an overcrowded situation? Stuff like that. And then really talking about the culture that you need to manage that turbulence, because growth comes with a lot of turbulence, unfortunately.
Yeah, growth does come with some turbulence, but I like that
A lot of
analogy a
turbulence,
lot.
unfortunately.
Maybe because I was just on a flight from the Bay Area to New York this week, and you can't have too many bathrooms. But no, that makes a lot of sense. What were maybe some of those kind of key indicators or like those first KPIs maybe that you focused
No.
on, right? So you said, hey, maybe if we expand the wingspan, maybe if we get, I think, some bigger tires, like what were those specific examples for you where you said, okay, here's where we're going to start to scale, and maybe kind of the way you're viewing some of the the risks and things you need to think about?
Yeah, so I think I really just started with what I consider the sort of mission critical factors, right? So it's win rate, it's pipeline, sales cycle, all of that, and really just trying to figure out, looking closer on the hood, trying to understand what we did to actively manage that. What does good look like? So we had a whopping 41% win rate when I started, which is very healthy for any
Wow.
SaaS company. We
Yeah.
had a NRR of 110%, so we grew organically at the time. Sales cycle was actually decent, but just trying to understand what was the actions we took to get to the actual performance we're seeing from a RevOps point of view. Um, and asking questions around, so what is the pipeline development? What does the AEs do here? How do we build that? How do we forecast? How do we predict? And trying to get closer to that. And in that process, you find that even in the best performing company, if you can't answer those types of questions, you're probably not close enough to what you need to be in order to build a scaling organization.
No, definitely. Well, I'm curious and almost jealous. If win rates were in the 40s, that to me, I don't know. I mean, you could be ambitious and try to get to the 50s, I suppose. Was there something else like, okay, we're closing really, really well? Was it maybe like, okay, let's fill that funnel more and like kind of build more pipeline, or like how did you think about scaling the company knowing win rates are so high?
Yeah, so I think the main conclusion, or the first conclusion we arrived at, is that it was primarily built on inbounds, so referrals. So the reason why we had such or enjoyed such high win rates was that it was really sort of inbound leads that was generated for us. So customers who knew about our platform, our company, our vision, and really aligned well on that, which of course meant that they were late in the funnel. So it was more about converting
Right.
them as they went in. The problem with that is it wasn't really in our hands. So when you talk about scaling, obviously you can do some to the extent of marketing and so on. But if you really wanted to build something that scales also internationally, we needed to build
Right.
another revenue engine. So we set out to put in motion the outbound function, really trying to supplement what we already had going for us, and take sort of destiny into our own hands, and have an engine we can invest in more actively.
And I know we kind of talked about in the past, prepping for this. Is that about how you, was that part of building the Center for Commercial Excellence? Like, is this kind of how the outbound motion played into part? Okay, I see you nodding your head. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, how did you actually kind of put the, wheels to the pavement?
Yeah, so again, from my initial analysis of the RevOps, so our commercial engines and how we were functioning, we actually derived a new sales strategy. We also defined a new commercial strategy. So we put together a commercial strategy house, looked at what are the disciplines we have that we are good at right now, and which are the ones that are necessary for us to go to the next step change. So not incremental changes, but really getting us into the next league and be able to scale and growth. And in that regard, one of the critical functions I found was what you would call RevOps or commercial excellence. So really putting together a dedicated function to look at how the engine was functioning, both for what was already there, so the existing, you could say, revenue performance we had, but also very much in the view of how do you scale, how do you make sure you efficiently can grow this, how do we get the instrument readings we need, so we don't go into trapdoor decisions or inefficient deployment of investment, and how do we actually get sales enablement, how do we build on both existing population, but also the outbound engine, how does that look? So we came out of that process with 3 new functions. One was RevOps or commercial excellence. Another was inside sales, which is essentially the outbound sales engine we now have. And then we have another arm called corporate development, which is around partnerships and mergers and acquisition, which was also necessary at this point.
Very interesting. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So from that kind of one question of like how do we scale the plane efficiently, we came up with 3 new functions. Were there any that process of creating or realizing that those were the 3 functions is really interesting to me. Were there any kind of like aha moments, Carsten, as you were kind of like planning with the team? I don't know, maybe looking at data, analyzing the data, like did anything kind of pop out at you as like, oh, that's the thread to pull, or that's the path that we should really go down? Maybe something that was new to you.
So I guess one of the things that I definitely saw quickly was that we had an organization of extremely learning focused and agile individuals across, so people who really wanted to be shown the path. So which are the things that we need to do? And I could see that we have for best intents just tried to do our best in all of these functions, but people really didn't have necessarily the background or the outside experience to actually put that together. So we had to bring in people with experience that had done it before, who had seen it before, who knew what were the tools that we needed to deploy, who could come in and actually coach. So we had a super organization that was ready to listen and to get coached, but we needed someone to actually come in and show those types of tools. And then I think the other thing that is very important for me is that you create when you make such an organizational change, that you create an environment where there are checks and balances, where the environment itself will challenge constructively each other, inspiring to do better, but also let the operators know, or let the operators actually show you where are the red flags. So where does the link in this chain drop off, so that everybody understands exactly what part they play in the overall revenue ops of the company, and you can then see that throughout the entire chain. So I think an example of that is, for instance, that commercial excellence is so close to sales that they actually develop the lead prospect lists, which they hand out to inside sales, who are then responsible for booking the demos for the AEs to then convert. Commercial excellence in turn also holds AEs up on their performance. So you get this circle of activity where everybody has a hand in the overall revenue performance. And therefore, if something breaks, if the lead list is not good enough, inside sales will go back to commercial excellence saying you should do better lead scoring. And again, the AEs, if they get bad demos, they will come to the inside sales team and say, why are you delivering this to me? You need to prep me better. You need to make sure that this is qualified properly. And there you create this circle where it constantly improves all the time. And you as a manager of that don't necessarily have to step in very often, because the system itself is designed to actually improve.
That totally makes sense. Okay, so we've got the new functions. It sounds like we've ironed out the alignment, right? And that's provided you a lot more visibility, right? Because now, teams are talking to each other. They see what's working, what's not, and you can iterate as you go. What are some of the insights that you have today, right? Because it's a year later. So I'd love to know maybe some of the real-time insights that you have now, right? He's smiling. So you're like, yeah, I've got some good stuff here. What do you have today that you didn't have a year ago?
Also, we have a lot of stuff today that didn't have a year ago. So I think The first thing that we experienced was, of course, which I think most RevOps people can relate to, is you see that your month is not performing the way that you are thinking it should. So you are behind pace. It's still early in the month, but as days pass, you find that you are still behind pace.
Right.
And then you bring the team together saying, okay, guys, something isn't right here. Either we're not getting the inbounds that we're looking for, the outbound function isn't delivering, the AEs cannot convert. What's going on? Now the month is the quarter is at risk. And you sit in that meeting and realize that there isn't really much you can do. So all
Yeah.
the levers that you have is like, can we price something here? Can we do something, a discount maybe, to try to get people over the line? And so one of the insights we now have is we sort of develop this. I call it what to do when you're in the gutter playbook. So it's inspired by Donald Duck's Three Nephews, which has this junior woodchuck's guidebook that whatever they're looking for, they can find in that book. And essentially what it is for us is a book that has a list of what levers do you have at your disposal depending on the time of your concern. So if you're concerned about something happening 3 months from now, because now you have more predictability after running RevOps in a different way, what can you instigate today that will improve your likelihood of targets, getting your targets in 3 months from now? What if it's a week from now? What if it's 2 weeks from now? So it's basically a playbook that then designs around, again, what can you do at any given point in time, and what is sort of the impact of that. And I think this goes back to my analogy on the aircraft. You as a commercial leader or a salesperson or a RevOps person needs to understand how the engine functions in integral detail, because that is the only way you can figure out what are your levers of success, what is the efforts versus impact that you're looking for, and how does
Yeah.
that actually play. And it will not be constant. So you need to constantly
Right.
experiment, tweak, try out new things, because if you don't in RevOps challenge your institutional knowledge by saying, we did that 3 years ago, that didn't work.
Yeah.
You will never find those bullets. You will never get those
Right.
opportunities to fruition. And I think that's another role that I think RevOps absolutely have to play, and some of the insights that gives us today. And we have tons of examples of what is delivered for us also on the more sort of hard code things.
That guidebook sounds very interesting. You'd probably sell a few copies if you put it on Amazon bookstore. What to do for short-term problems, or long-term potential problems. It sounds like that was an output of desired predictability, right? Like trying to figure out how we can stay on the course when there's short-term, long-term challenges. And also, I imagine, Carsten, probably prevented you, like you said, from making historical errors. Like, hey, we've already been there, but also making kind of like short-sighted, decisions, right? Like, hey, we're, like you said, we're not pacing on target for this month. Looking at this playbook and going, okay, well, should we make a short-term change, a change for short-term gain, or a little bit more long-term gain? Am I on the right path?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you, in that you can quickly get an idea of where are your potential opportunities for actually fixing whatever is going on that isn't really functioning, and it allows you to make interjections very very early on. So one of the other reasons for one of the first changes we made was actually to set up a sales management cadence, really interjecting a structured approach to pipeline management, to following up on the metrics, and really institutionalizing the metrics into the conversations, to the conversations I was having with the sales leaders to the AEs, and all of the operators around. What does this data actually tell us? What's different from what we've seen before? Why is that? So starting to hard code some of these questions so that you get this inquisitive, not
Yeah.
just from the RevOps function, because they are by nature inquisitive, but from everybody, the people on the front line, because that's where you get all of the insights, right? It's the front line
Right.
that let us know what the competitors are up to, what the market is doing, and that context is critical for the RevOps teams to actually make the right decision on which initiatives are we injecting or deploying right now. Because if you don't get that, you can make some really bad mistakes, unfortunately,
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, yeah. Getting the right market signal is obviously super important, and obviously there's ways. You can automate it with revenue intelligence. You can chat with the frontline managers. You had mentioned like there's a group of metrics that you're aligning the leadership team on. I'd love to uncover a little bit of like what those metrics are, and even more interestingly would be if those metrics have changed in the last year, right? From before you set up that center of excellence into now, or commercial excellence into now?
Absolutely. So I think one of my other mantras is let's go into analysis paralysis, because you can find as much data as you want and you can crunch it
Right.
all day long, but you really have to make the data in its is not the end to what you're looking for, right? It's driving actions that delivers revenue, better performance is what you're looking for.
Right.
So again, your first order of business is to understand which are the few critical metrics that you need to understand. Obviously, ARR and NRR are critical, but I think from us in RevOps, it's win rates. It's what is the sales cycle time? How does our pipeline look like? And then because we are scaling, the efficiency and onboarding is actually a very critical metric for us. That drives a lot of value for our company. And over the past year, we've actually managed to increase win rates by 10 to 15%, even
Wow.
up from 41%. The sales cycle has been reduced by 66%. So this is back to the cadence, fostering the right actions, making sure we constantly follow
Right.
up. And the onboarding time we've reduced from 4 weeks to 3 days until they start actually
Wow.
delivering first actions. So, and then we have, as I said, this what to do when you're in the gutter playbook. That's typically followed up with a line of sight exercise, which is a calls to arms kind of
Yeah.
exercise where you sit and say, okay, so we're right now in trouble. How do we get to our targets? Okay,
Right.
these are the activities, these are the opportunities. Who are the owners of these? What are the next ones? What can we challenge ourselves to make sure they convert successfully? We've deployed that 4 times over the last 12 months, tried to get back on target, and all 4 times have actually been successful. I'm crossing my fingers because we're at the end of the month and we have it right now. So, but it's looking good. So again, I think there are these metrics you need to understand, and then you need to figure out what can you then do to impact them. What are the levers that you can pull from RevOps and of course from management to get to that point.
Well, I'm rooting for you if you're in the midst of Gutter Playbook Play 4 or version 4 right now. There's something you said that was interesting, which was, well, there's a bunch of things you said, but the onboarding from weeks into 3 days. And you said because they're focused, I think you said on the right actions. I would love to hear if you have examples of like, you don't have to go through the whole, I'm sure it's a long process, obviously, to analyze what those were. But I'd love to know maybe a couple examples of, hey, people were doing X and now we realize they only need to do Y, or they're doing X incorrectly or way too long. You know what I mean? Are there any examples you can share of like what you cut or prioritize to help accelerate that time to value for new hires?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing we did was we actually established a sales enablement function under commercial excellence or RevOps,
Mm.
who then developed what we call the Family Sales Academy. So a very structured approach to onboarding, making sure you know exactly what to do at any given point in time. The person we actually led for that is a former heads of sales, so it's sales people that have been doing this for a long while that
Right.
knows exactly what the operators are going into. And then I think because you love your customers so much, which we of course obviously also do, you almost get scared with interaction with them too early. So there is something around the courage that sort of deterred us from saying, no, I won't touch the customers until I know everything there is to know.
Right.
Because what if I
Over
do something
preparing.
wrong? Yeah, what if I do something wrong? What if they're not
Right.
going to like me? All of that, right? So there's a large element of how do you structure that onboarding in a way where they feel supported and where
Yeah.
they get that sort of experience much sooner, because there isn't really much to lose and you do it in a controlled environment, of course.
Mhm.
So I think that the trick is to pair that in with structure. We also found that having people onboarding together at the same time so you could spar with each other and you can give
Yeah.
each other courage and confidence was a really good enabler for that. And we're seeing great results with that.
No, it's great. And to your point, it's like, when you're just getting started, you can't eliminate the risk. You can only reduce it, right? Of messing up or, saying the wrong thing. And it sounds like you've done that because you're basically describing a lot of, I'm going to say small, not to minimize it, but small incremental changes compounding on top of each other, right? It's not like this one big aha moment. We changed one big thing. It's a lot of small decisions compounded very intentionally from the moment that they first joined the company.
Yeah, no, it's exactly that, right? So every operator or every member we have going through this gives feedback to the sales manager and also to the sales enablement manager, which is not the same person, right? So you have an on-the-job coach, and then you have the onboarding coach, two different persons, right? And then you give feedback constantly to that iteration. And so as many as we've onboarded now, we've really gotten a lot close to what we think is what people need when they start our sales function. And I think that's the same for all of what we're trying to do is a constant revisiting of what we've achieved so far. And it's been quite an interesting journey so far.
Absolutely. I'm subscribed. I'm all in. I'm all in on hearing about this. So, I mean, it sounds like, Carsten, that, you know, you're striving for predictability, and that required visibility and alignment, right? And you've shared some great examples around that. To help some of our listeners who might be striving for the same thing, maybe they're getting, you know, just getting started, maybe they're kind of where you are in the journey or later, what are some of the things they should be looking out for? Or in other words, you know, what's holding them back knowingly or unknowingly, right, from being able to do some of the things that you've described effectively?
Yeah, it's of course a super good question, Devin, and difficult to answer. I think sometimes it's of course a lack of resources, capabilities. I'm sure most of your listeners, like me, have a lot of things on their to-do lists. So sitting down and asking yourself these questions and trying to figure it out, also given the complexity that you start to increase and the interrelationships and dependencies on each of the activities you put in play, it's a complex thing, right? And many of us are fortunate to be on a growth path, which is good. So as I said, family was beating month-on-month performance before also. What's to say that what we were putting in place was going to successfully or improve that? What's not to say that we were tearing down the house, asking all these questions, getting lost in analysis paralysis, or changing the winning formula to a losing formula, God forbid. And I think so. It's this: how do you fail small and learn fast? And how do you make sure you have the organization that's ready to learn from that, the capabilities required to actually dissect that data and the understanding of that, and the courage and time to actually execute it. So I think as I said, you don't really have that much time. Time is not a luxury that many of us have.
Right.
So for me, it was so important to hard code this. So we hard coded all meetings, all interactions around the data that we wanted. So in every interaction we had, we talked about the same metrics. We talked about how they're performing. We started asking the same questions so that every operator knew that this is what we were going to talk about, and started thinking around what are the actions that we can take and get really creative, because there is so much creativity in the sales team, and they are the front line, so they can see it working out. So for us, it was much about hard coding it, because the 3 hours a day doesn't just magically occur in your calendar to look at this. But predictability is absolutely paramount, and it's even more so in today's world, right? So if you think of the changes we're seeing in the financial climate today, predictability and hitting your ambitions becomes your license to operate. It is as simple as that. And RevOps carry a massive part in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think anyone's talking about having too much free time these days, especially in a fast-growing company. If anything, there's low on time, high on distractions. And if you have 30 minutes to spare, you're probably listening to the Reveal podcast anyway, Carsten, on your on your small coveted breaks. But you kind of mentioned the place I kind of wanted to wrap with here, which is I try not to use doom and gloom language, right? But you hear it, potential recession. I'll call it economic headwinds. I think that's a safe, fairly neutral way to put it. What heat checks would you recommend teams perform, to make sure that they're prepared to weather what may be coming?
It's a great question, Devin. So we're obviously going through a lot of that right now. And I think we have to remember that as difficult as it may get, from difficulty and overcoming that, we all get better. So if you think back in time, some of the best companies today, Salesforce, Airbnb, Amazon, all transformed over the last similar situation that we were facing. So there's massive opportunity here, and massive opportunity for riding the platform, making sure that it stands stronger as it is. And I think it's on a number of dimensions that you need to be particularly aware. So one is leadership, making sure that the leaders you have in place understands what kind of turbulence that they're going into and how they're going to operate and manage that successfully. SaaS and tech is a relatively new industry, so not many people have been here that long, haven't necessarily experienced what I was just referring to. And that is going to be paramount to make sure that the focus doesn't get distracted from the organization. Aside from that, as also related to, of course, RevOps, is we've done a lot of scenario planning. So we've looked at different ways to understand how our business is performing. You can't really control the financial environment around you, but you can control your investments and where you're putting in your efforts. So again, understanding effort, impact, reward, and risk is critical in your sales engine or revenue engine, or understanding your customer acquisition cost, what's happening with the win rates, all the leading indicators of where you are headed, so you can make sure you stay on track sooner. We also instigated what we call a 90-day cadence. So now we sit and we say, we know that we want to do business planning for 3 years and budget planning for 1 year, but we also know that right now things are changing so fast that we need to, every 90 months, to revisit this to make sure our assumptions hold, so that we in time can pull whatever levers we need to stay in control, so we don't get off track. I think there's a lot to be done in that space. And then I think, of course, there's a lot you can do in terms of automation, tooling, and coaching of your sales force from the RevOps teams to actually get more efficiency out of what you have. Right, you can achieve quite a lot, and you also need to look at your markets and your customers. So, is it now enterprise customers, or is it SMB that I should be betting on? What's looking more favorable? What can I do with my pricing? And again, making sure you stay so close to your customers. You really need the customers' love, and if you have that, then you're also gonna, if you stay in control, go through this, right? And you will come out stronger because you will have learned so much from that process that it can be a pivotal moment for you as a company, but in a very positive way, despite the potential doom and gloom.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful. That makes a lot of sense. Last question, if you're able to share, is as you're kind of doing these pre-planning, right, these different scenarios, are there any places, I don't want to say where you're definitely not going to invest. I'd rather go positive and say where you'll continue to invest. Are there any places where you look at the business and like, hey, kind of almost no matter what happens, these are the places we definitely should keep investing in and focusing on?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of areas. So we've decided to double down on the markets that we see having the potential, where we feel that we can deploy efficiently investments, and where we know we've only sort of started the tip of the iceberg. We've also withdrawn from some of the market expansion plans we had because we felt that it would be too risky, but more importantly, it would deter management attention because you would be spread so thin that you would not be able to necessarily pick up on leading indicators fast enough and interject fast enough to stay in control. And then, as I also just alluded to, it's all about customers and making sure that they continue to favor us as a service. And we see a lot of potential growing with our existing customer base. So we're also sort of transforming some of our efforts into what can we actually build for our existing customers so that we continue to grow even with less sort of organic or new revenue coming in from new customers.
I like it. No new icebergs, at least for the near future.
Nope.
Go deep versus wide. I like it. Well, Carsten, thank you for hanging out and for sharing your expertise and your wisdom. This is really insightful. And there's two kind of words that are jumping out other than RevOps, which is visibility and alignment. I think that's key for what we were talking about today. So I appreciate you hanging out with us on Reveal. I know it's late for you in Denmark, so I'll say, say goodbye for now until we cross paths again, and hope you have a fantastic weekend.
Yeah, thank you, Devin, and thanks for having me and of course this fantastic podcast. So appreciate that.